Good afternoon and welcome back to St Albans. So it's been a little while actually since I recorded the intro video to the channel, and so that now it's the start of November, and I started recording the intro video and edited it at the start of October and then published it towards the end of October. So it's been about a month, and unfortunately since then we have had two floods. We've had a couple of really heavy downpours a couple of times in the month. I know the north and Scotland have had way worse than we have, but it has been bad enough here to bring up the water again just after one day of heavy torrential rainfall. Luckily, it has gone down pretty fast each time. It's been up and flooded for less than a week each time. In fact, the second time went down surprisingly quickly. I think it was just 3 days really, maybe 4 days before the seating area, which I'm sitting in now, was completely clear. This is the lowest part of the plot. It kind of dips down even into here. So this is always the last bit to drain, and right now there's no water in here. It's obviously extremely damp, and you couldn't walk around here without wellies without ruining your trainers. The wood chip just looks like a total mess, and yeah, there's been quite a lot of stuff that is now looking really messy, sadly. And the frosts haven't helped at all. It's kind of, obviously it's expected. It's the end of the year. We're nearly at Christmas already, and it's yeah, kind of frosts are expected. So I'm not so worried about that. Bit sad about the floods, and they maybe kind of made a few things go over a little bit earlier than they should have. But luckily, like I say, they have gone down pretty quickly. So yeah, the next videos that I wanted to do on the channel were to do a couple of in-depth plot tours. But right now, plot 79 is such a mess because we've got lots of leaf fall from the trees. We have a lot of stuff that's very sad looking because of the frosts, plus very squelchy underfoot because of the floods, and then a lot of the broadbeans, they've just got to come out. And even the ones in the windbreak, they unfortunately have succumbed to the ridiculous rain and wind that we have been having. So even after that really heavy rainfall, we had really heavy wind for a few days, and it's just battered everything. And I think going forwards, normally we wouldn't want to try and like spruce up the plot before a plot tour, because I think it's really important to show how it looks, even if it's not perfect, because that is just what it is. Like, we're not perfect, and the allotment sometimes looks like a mess and some things go wrong. But in this case, because it's been flooded and frosty, I think what we're going to do is give the plot a bit of a tidy up, and there won't be many plants to talk about. It's a really weird time to start a YouTube channel actually. It's quite difficult because everything's dying back, everything looks gross because of the leaf fall and that kind of stuff. So instead of the plot tours which I've been doing on Instagram, where I'm talking more about the plants that we've sown and what is growing and that kind of, and how stuff is doing in terms of growing, I'll still talk about what is available, what's around, but mostly I think we'll use these plot tours, these first plot tours, as an opportunity to go a bit more in depth about why certain stuff is a certain way, the raised beds that we've built, why we've got two greenhouses, how our cameras work and why we have cameras, and then the history behind what this seating area frame used to be, and then from that point we can then just do normal plot tours. So the first one will probably be a little bit more longer than normal ones would be. Maybe not if there's not a lot of plants to talk about, but there is a possibility that it will go on for a bit longer than usual. And then plot 12s won't be quite as long because there's not as much to talk about. But yeah, we'll use the opportunity to talk about the history behind the way stuff is, and then also use the opportunity to talk about future plans that we have for each of the plots and the different areas in the plots, because there's a lot of plans. The most recent one that we've been talking about is putting a roof on this seating area. We were just going to have it as just like slats across, just for the plants to grow over, but because it's constantly damp, we need somewhere to dry to be able to sit. Not such a big deal like when you come down and it's raining, more that when it's been raining and then you come down while it's sunny, the cushions and everything are soaking wet because this is just completely open here. So that's just one of the many things that we've been talking about doing over winter. So yeah, before we can do that though, we do need to tidy up plot 79. So that is today's job, and I'm not going to get it all done today because I'm just down here on my lunch break. But since it's nice weather, very chilly, but very nice weather, I thought it was a good opportunity to spend some time talking to you about what's next for the channel and actually get cracking on doing some tidying up, which is very sorely needed on this plot after the weather that we've been having. So let's get going. Actually, before we get going, let's make a cup of hot chocolate. Cheers. Oh yeah, it's lovely. So, I think once I've had this, in fact, while I'm having this, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most as the most disgusting that needs to be fixed is the two sets of beans. So we've got the borlotti beans, which are very clearly not frost tolerant at all. Didn't quite finish ripening before the frost hit them, so I'm not sure if the beans are going to be any good. And then also the broad beans, which should be a little bit more frost hardy, are not so wind hardy, and they are just completely snapped and looking very sad, and also probably not very flood, and also probably not very flood hardy either. So they need to come out too. So that is probably the first thing they do, because it's going to make the world of difference to how the plot looks when you first walk up to it. Here are the offending beans I was talking about. So these were borlotti beans here, obviously not frost hardy at all, and I've checked the beans, and although some of them had some colour on, the actual beans themselves are quite small in there and not sure they're even good for eating, so we'll probably just pop all that in the compost bin. And then these very sad looking broad beans, I think we just need to give up here. Unfortunately, they were looking really good a few weeks ago, just before I did the intro video actually, but they've just been so battered by the wind. Most of them are now snapped, and the flowers just keep getting knocked off, and they just look really sad. So they can come out, it can all go in the compost bin. It's not a complete disaster, because it did have a nice side effect of improving the soil, which is the other reason that we put them in the ground. Obviously we wanted some produce off of them, but what we will do is we will just cut them all off at the base, hopefully leave all the nitrogen in the soil, and then we'll mulch it, and then potentially replace them with some onions, which we have growing in modules in the greenhouse, or garlic, but we already have garlic in this bed right next to it, which is doing it okay actually, despite the flooding. So yeah, all these beans need to come out, going to go in a compost bin, and then we'll see what to do from there. Well, in true St Albans fashion, it has now started raining and it's pretty cold. So I was going to sort these beans out today, but I think I'm actually going to go home and see Poppy, because I miss Poppy, and see Sergio, because I miss Sergio. And then I'll come back down here tomorrow morning, which is Saturday morning. Hopefully it won't be raining, and then we can crack on with taking out the beans and tidying up the plot, because it really does need it. There's a lot to do, but I don't really fancy being down here in the cold and the rain, especially while it's already quite socky down here. So I think I'm going to postpone this until tomorrow. Good morning. It is now Saturday lunchtime-ish, and I'm back down the plot. The weather isn't actually a lot better today. It is a little bit warmer, and it's certainly not raining, but it's very cloudy, and as you can probably see from behind me, it's quite windy as well. Hopefully the mic does a pretty good job of cancelling that out, and you don't really hear it, but I apologise if you can hear the wind, and I also apologise if you can hear any other noise, because Saturdays are quite noisy around the site. So there's a main road down the side of the site there. There's just like a couple of plots over before you get to the road. And quite often we get racers racing up and down, revving their engines, and you can hear their exhaust like popping around the surrounding roads. And then there's also quite a few sirens sometimes, and there's also a park and a field over there, and you often get people screaming and, you know, being noisy. So I apologise in advance if any of that gets picked up today. Normally I try to come down during the week where it's a little bit quieter, but really need to get the plot tidied up. So that is why I'm down here today, and that's what I'm going to get on with next after I drink my coffee. So that's all the beans out now, of this bed anyway. So as I said yesterday, I think it was, rather than just pull them out, I've just cut them off at the base, and I've purposely left the weeds because I just wanted to show you actually that although we didn't get any crops off of any of them, they have done two jobs. One is to improve the soil. So this is way better than it was. This is like much looser and in much better condition than it was before we put the beans in. Plus also, there's not a lot of weeds in there. I think we've only weeded it a couple of times, and it was done no dig, and then I just pushed the beans straight into the ground, and then maybe weeded it once or twice as they were coming up. And there's only a few decent sized weeds in there, so yeah, we didn't get any produce off of it, but still did a couple of good jobs. Done. And then same deal with these beans here. These are already a little bit too battered to continue going, although they are still growing. They're just too much of a mess, and I think we'll just take these ones out too. There is a third set in that windbreak over there, which are still looking okay. Might leave those just to see how they get on, but if it just keeps raining, the flowers just keep getting destroyed and then no beans form. But those ones have got a bit of a better chance than these ones. These ones are gone, I think. State of them are just completely snapped in some places. So yeah, they're done. So I'm going to take these ones out too. Swear to God, the stinging nettles on this site are some sort of mutant breed. They hurt way more than any I've ever known anywhere else. Okay, so I've got the beans out now. A lot more weeds in this. I haven't actually completely finished weeding. I've got most of the worst ones out. A lot of this is just leaves and stuff, but yeah, a lot more weeds than the other bed. Not 100% sure why. Possibly because we just haven't worked this ground as much. This is the first thing we've ever grown in this bit of the plot. We only took over this end of the plot obviously at the start of last year, then didn't really get much chance to use it because of the flooding and stuff. It was kind of no dig. It was mulched by the council when they damaged the plot with their lawnmower, and then also when the potatoes are finished we empty them and then we just kind of mulch it very lightly with the spent potato compost from the bags, and then just plant straight into it, which we've done with all of these. But yeah, it was a lot more weedy than the other bed, but it is what it is, and it's a bit better now. And then we'll probably just cover it, maybe mulch it again, and then cover it, although we do want to try and get these fences in properly over winter, so we're not really sure exactly where the paths and stuff are going to be yet, but we'll figure that out as we go. So behind me is where most of our sunflowers were this year, and I think it's time to take those out as well. But just like the beans, we don't really want to take out the root balls because they get huge and then they end up leaving a massive hole in the ground. So we're going to try and cut them off at the base with these loppers, and then any of the seed heads which are still have seeds on, we'll cut those off and just leave them on the ground underneath where the plant was, and that does two things. One, hopefully it will feed the wildlife, and then anything that doesn't get eaten by the wildlife will hopefully self-seed for next year, so we'll just have a continuous cycle of sunflowers in this area. They normally pop up all around the site, all around the plot, but we're trying to keep them contained to the ends, so it's a bit more manageable, especially because they do suck up quite a lot of water and nutrients. So they look beautiful, and they get to about 8 or 9 foot here. They're really, really big, so we do save the seed every year just to make sure that we can keep them going, but they're pretty good at self-seeding as well. So next job, take them out. That was a really quick job. Yeah, I think there's only a couple left with seed heads on, so I'll just cut those off and leave those for the wildlife. Another thing that's worth mentioning as well is that along with leaving the root balls in the ground, because the root balls get so big, we've also found that the stalks, because they're so thick, especially some like this one, like this is really thick, they take way too long to compost down in the compost bin if you just put them in as they are. But if you leave them to dry, they break up quite easily the next year, and then they can go in the compost bin as brown material. Or at least that's worked really well for us anyway. So we've been storing stuff in these, in this old sieve that we made from an old pallet, from an old crate. We haven't really been using the sieve that much, so this time we've been putting things like these really thick stalks from the sunflowers and from the sweet corn as well in there. So hopefully by next spring they will have dried out, they will have gone nice and crispy, and then we can just put them, kind of break them up and put them into the compost bin as brown material. Okay, there's one more job that I want to get done today. The sun is starting to set. It sets so early now. And also Poppy's been on her own for a really long time at home while we've been tidying here. And also nearby is the cathedral grounds where the fireworks are tonight, and they have just started testing their music, which is really loud, so you can probably hear that at some point as well. So I think this is going to be the last thing that we do today. I'm going to take out this very sad looking parsley and then go home and see Poppy. You might be wondering why I am just cutting back the parsley and not pulling it out like the rest of the weeds. And you also might be wondering why I'm even cutting the parsley back at all. So firstly, because it flooded, the parsley went a bit yellow and isn't particularly happy. And the reason that I'm cutting it back rather than pulling it out is because, if I show you, whoop, it is actually regrowing. So I thought we'd just give it another chance. So I've done this. This is the stuff that I harvested a couple of fairly recently, and then it flooded after I did that. So the rest of them looked a bit sad. But so I've just cut these back as well, just to see if they regrow in a similar way. If not, then it's no big deal. We're going to redo these beds anyway. So the idea, I think, is to kind of section these up a little bit because they're a little bit too big to manage. But in the meantime, we'll let this parsley try again, and if it does, then great. So I think that is about all we've got time for today. Not a bad day, much more successful than yesterday, much more productive than yesterday. So we ended up getting all the beans out and weeded that bed, and then mulched the second bed of broad beans as well, so that looks a lot tidier. And then also taken out or cut back the parsley. Sergio's raked up quite a lot of the leaves. We've taken down the sunflowers, and just generally like tidied up some of the bed coverings and stuff. It looks a lot better now. It certainly looks a lot less like we've just had a flood. So I think the next video will most likely be a plot tour. I'll start with plot 79 because it's obviously the most mature plot. And yeah, I'll give you guys a quick whiz round. I don't, it won't be quick actually. I'll give you guys a decent tour of plot 79 and a bit of history behind why stuff is a certain way and what our plans are for the future. But until then, I hope that I will see you in the next video. So from me, Sergio and Poppy, take the best of care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. Okay.